Hey, Mark, thanks so much for taking the time to come and talk with us today. I'm wanting to do a little bit of a dive into policy. It's not everybody's favourite topic, but it's an absolute fundamental rock if we're thinking about getting the housing outcomes that we want for our communities. You, in your role, look after the policy here for Hamilton City Council. Um, what are the mechanisms that are most helpful for you as a council when you're stepping into your roles of planning, consenting, development contributions, in some cases the deployment of strategic land assets, in support of affordable housing outcomes for your community here in the Hamilton area?
Yeah, so maybe just giving a little bit of background in terms of kind of the policy and planning environment. So we're kind of unique in the Waikato in that we've got what's called Future-Proof, which is effectively a partnership between a whole lot of key stakeholders and territorial local authorities, including iwi and a number of Crown entities. And effectively what Future-Proof does is set a 30 to 50 year vision for the sub-region, because obviously, as you might be aware, Hamilton's kind of jurisdictional boundary finishes effectively at the urban edge.
Yes.
And so there's a huge amount of, intermingling in terms of labour markets, economies, housing markets that I guess reach far beyond the jurisdictional boundary of Hamilton, into the Waikato and Waipa and the like. So we've had that framework in place for about the last 20 years or so. A key element of that is really around how we manage growth and how we deliver affordable housing, among a number of other key priorities as well. And the policy positions that are agreed to between the key stakeholders around that table then cascade down into the things like our district plans. So to give you an example, our district plan we've had in place basically inclusionary zoning policies in certain greenfield growth areas for a number of years now. And they are requiring a certain amount of product to be delivered to market every year. They're also requiring certain typologies, a mix of typologies, as well as actually a discount on whatever the median household price is.
Superb. So how do you incentivize compliance?
Well, it's baked into the district plan.
Okay.
So it was part of negotiations that took place when these new greenfield areas were coming to life and being contemplated. That in return for infrastructure servicing, in return for council's support to urbanise these areas, then effectively the council was looking for some public good in return. And the council over successive mayors and governing bodies has been really, a key focus has been around affordable housing.
Fantastic. Could you please, for our listeners and viewers, give us a sort of a 101 on inclusionary from your perspective?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think inclusionary zoning has become a little bit of a bad name, right? I think currently, I think people see it as an additional tax or an additional levy. I think there are some concerns out there in the development market that councils or other Crown entities are going to be taking land off you. But I mean, fundamentally, it's about how do we achieve affordable housing within these new communities that are being built and developed. And so I think you could, inclusionary zoning, there are many methods to it, some of which we've already experimented with, such as, in the district plan, having these requirements for affordability to be baked in. Other jurisdictions here in New Zealand and overseas do choose to take some sort of financial contribution from the developer to then reinvest into a community housing provider or housing portfolio themselves. San Francisco is very well established in that regard in terms of their housing portfolio, and they've been doing that for a number of decades. So I think it's horses for courses as to what policy response suits the jurisdiction that you're in.
What I'm hearing you say, though, is that there's no real legal or structural impediment as a local government entity to doing it. Others elsewhere in the country, Queenstown Lakes, for example, have expressed a desire to see some form of central legislation to reduce the risk that they hold as the territorial local authority to litigation. Have you a view on whether that would assist you if there was some central legislation that enabled inclusionary, or are you comfortable rowing your own boat here in Hamilton?
I think what I'd say is it will be very challenging for us to introduce a universal policy that requires a certain amount of affordable housing to be provided in any development, whether it's the developer delivering it themselves or whether or not there is some sort of gifting of land or some sort of financial provision provided for. So I'd say it's very challenging. And I think my observation would be that to get that policy across the line, it needs to go through an RMA process, and the costs and benefits need to be explored. That's then subject to environment court appeal and things like that. So that the evidential basis to be able to introduce a policy like that has to be extremely sound. And I know Queenstown Lakes have recently sort of run into that issue. I think, from my point of view, personally, a brokering relationship with the developers, which is what we've tried here, is probably a lot more successful and enduring, because there's genuine give and take rather than this just kind of universal policy being rolled out.
Yep.
Because I guess at the end of the day, we need to ensure that the development's still going to be feasible,
Yep.
right? We still want houses on the ground. So by imposing a sort of across the board tax may well then lead to some developments, for example, maybe brownfield developments being unfeasible. Also got to be careful of unintended consequences, so that, if you're bringing in to say, well, for 10 unit developments or more, we want, one dwelling set aside for affordability. Well, that then can have some perverse outcomes for the market as well.
Yeah, okay, thank you. No, it's good to hear your reflections on that. I'd like to bring us back to the place-based approach, which is very much in favour with the current government, and this Waikato Housing Initiative and the interface between the Future Proof and the Waikato Housing Initiative. We from the outside view what's going on here in the Waikato as a very exciting opportunity to unlock a place-based approach where you have, in fact, in the room just beside us here, a table where a group of key stakeholders all sit together with a commonly declared goal of addressing the housing affordability challenges of the area. It's a beacon of hope for many of us, and we're hoping that we could replicate it elsewhere. How do you feel it's going, and what are the opportunities that it might unlock in the near to medium term future?
What I'd say is the affordable housing issue is so critical that we can probably never quite do enough, right? So what we're doing here is an incredibly good start. And I think what is unique about what we've got going on here is that we're not only looking across the housing continuum from social housing providers, CHIPS, the likes of Kāinga Ora through to councils, and from a supply side and policy point of view. But we've also got health authority in the room as well, and so a number of other key agencies where they might not actually be delivering housing themselves, but their clients or those who they look after, housing has a direct impact on them. So it's actually good for everybody within the ecosystem to be delivering more affordable housing at better quality, to actually improve the overall ecosystem of what's going on in some of these communities. Implementation is always the challenge. So while we've got very good collaboration going on, it's always, well, what specifically can we help deliver, and how can we measure and track and monitor that delivery to make sure that our efforts are going in the right places and delivering tangible outcomes. So I think that's the challenge. Also think in this kind of the new paradigm that I see us entering, which is more around a supply side policy response from the government, is, well, what's our role in that? So the policy levers are possibly not what they once were. And, we've got policies coming from the government shortly to, zone 30 years worth of land supply. We've also got fast track that's already here. How do we work and influence within those new policy settings and within those new kind of broader sort of political drivers?
Yeah, because obviously the RMA is reform is on the agenda, and things seem to be moving at significant pace. Any barriers you can see on the road ahead of us as we seek to make our cities and communities more livable and inclusive?
I think probably the big one, well, there's a number of things in that, but one would be about certainty for the market, because fundamentally, the bulk of the stock is delivered by the private market.
Always has been. Yep, absolutely.
So if we're creating uncertainty through changes in law or legislation or policy, and the broader economic environment we're operating in, that'll diminish supply. And as soon as demand starts to ramp up, we'll then see a more sharp escalation in price, which means that the dream of home ownership, or even those wanting affordable rentals, will get further out of reach. So I think we really need to be conscious of providing a stable environment for developers to be willing to invest into and deliver product. Then the next question becomes, well, how can we work with those developers, and how can we pull the levers that we have available? Could be infrastructure delivery, could be infrastructure funding, could be about being more collaborative and kind of, I guess, business friendly, business orientated with developers to try and get some public good in return in the form of affordable housing.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah. I'm glad you've mentioned infrastructure. Just wanted to ask, in Auckland, for example, talking with leading developers and providers of new supply up in Auckland, it looks likely that development contributions might kick in at over $100,000 per unit, which is in some ways contrary to the desired outcome of going for growth, which is being led by Minister Bishop at the moment. What are your thoughts on infrastructure provision as it relates to residential supply in the Waikato region, and what's going to work best for our shared sort of desired outcome of greater affordability?
Same sort of dichotomy that we've got going on here. So infrastructure becoming more and more expensive. We can't deliver enough of it to service all the areas that are being opened up. So the model's got to change, right? So council's got to rethink how it delivers infrastructure and how it funds and finances it. And in the world where we're going to be opening multiple new greenfield growth cells all at the same time, which is the express intent of the government in terms of flooding the market with supply, well, we need to rethink what council's role is in infrastructure delivery. Because clearly when you're talking about DCs north of 100K, that's going to have an impact on affordability, and probably a pretty negative one perhaps. We are seeing that in Hamilton quite acutely. We've got wastewater constraints within some of our brownfield environments because we've been allowing for intensification over a period of time, sweating existing assets, and now we've reached a point where we actually have to invest more in the ground before we can allow further development to occur. We've got other large-scale greenfield growth areas like Peacock, where council has been the lead kind of investor funder for the enabling infrastructure. Again, I think the model's changing to one where you're going to have multiple greenfield growth cells, and it's going to the responsibility of that lead infrastructure is going to have to fall more heavily on the developers themselves.
Okay, interesting context. Yeah. Are you getting a sense of the direction that Chris Bishop wants to go with the RMA reform, and is it going to help the region develop the housing that's needed?
It appears to me that there's going to be a more codified sort of system in play, where it will actually limit every individual council sort of TLA reinventing the wheel time and time again. Okay. So I think that'll be a good thing.
Broadly seems like a good idea.
Broadly a good idea. But I mean, the thing you've got to watch for is whether or not that will then stifle innovation. And so what I would say is things like inclusionary zoning, as controversial as they may be, it are local authorities, local areas, local councils, communities trying to innovate to find solutions to a problem. Now, it may be that inclusionary zoning isn't the right solution to a problem, but if we're not trialling and testing that, then we'll never know. So I think there's a lot of, I don't think we should be stifling innovation in that regard. But yeah, finding that balancing act will be the trick. Yeah.
Typically in the community housing sector, we use a definition of affordable housing as a ratio of housing cost to income, and typically, and throughout much of New Zealand history, we had a 3-to-1 ratio. It's stretched significantly throughout the country, and here in the Golden Triangle, here we are in Hamilton, we have Tauranga across at the coast and Auckland above us. It's averaging around 9.
Yep.
What's your view on affordable housing and how we might as a nation change the trend of growing unaffordability to narrow that gap between incomes and house prices?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like any business. You've got 2 key levers available to you. Either you reduce cost, which is, introducing a more affordable product, or you increase your prices, which is people earning more. And I think for a long time, at least the last couple of decades, we've always been talking about productivity, increased productivity, increased productivity. And when you look at the data, every 10 years, roughly household incomes increase by about 30%. What we've seen over successive decades is that the house price has outstripped income. And so the divide between the two is just growing. And what that's meaning is that we've got this systemic problem within the housing market, because it'll mean that a whole lot of people are going to be further away from home ownership or being able to even get into affordable rentals. So we need some sort of circuit breaker, some sort of intervention to change that. And I mean, maybe it's in some of the new concepts and products such as build to rent that are being introduced. I think what I would say, it's going to require a whole lot of levers to influence it. Interest rates, I mean, that's a big driver as well. It's helpful. How New Zealand's overall economy is performing on the world stage is another. So they're not all sort of falling at the feet of a council to resolve. We're part of an ecosystem. We've got some levers we can pull, and we should be trialing and testing those to see what works best. But I think New Zealand has to front up to how serious is it taking this affordability issue, and therefore, if it is actually as serious as the data and we all know it is on the ground, then we need to be very single-minded in terms of pulling every lever available, or at least sort of trying and innovating to try and fix it.
Yeah, great. Yeah, nice. That's really helpful. Thank you so much for taking time to talk with us today. Really appreciate it.